Hey Guy, and welcome to our history podcast for sleep. Tonight, we're stepping away from the grand halls of history, from the stories of empires and the clash of armies. We're going to walk a much smaller, quieter, and dustier path. We're going to follow a single figure through the hills of 1st century Galilee, but we won't be focusing on the miracles or the great sermons. We're going to look for the quiet moments in between. The shared meals, the weary evenings, the simple human gestures that are so often lost in the grandeur of the story. But first, as always, a small dose of reality. In the world we are about to enter, you probably won't survive. Following an itinerant preacher who challenges both the religious and political authorities of a Roman-occupied territory is a very good way to find yourself on the wrong side of a spear. For now, however, all you need to do is listen. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like this episode or subscribe to the podcast, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. So turn on your fan, dim the lights, and get comfortable. Your world is one of dust, heat, and hard work. You are a fisherman on the Sea of Galilee, or a stonemason in a small village, or a farmer's wife whose life is measured by the rhythm of the harvest. Your land is occupied by the iron fist of Rome. Your spiritual life is governed by the complex and burdensome rules of the temple priests and Pharisees, and your future seems as unchanging as the dry, brown hills around you. But recently, a new story, a new rumor, has begun to ripple through the marketplaces and the fishing villages. It's not about a new rebellion against Rome or a new king rising in Jerusalem. It's about a man, a local man. The son of the craftsman Joseph from the village of Nazareth. You know of Nazareth. This is a quirky historical tidbit that colors all the early stories. Nazareth is a small, obscure, out-of-the-way town. It's a place of no importance. When people from your town, Capernaum, speak of it, they often joke, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" And yet, the rumors are about a Nazarene. His name is Yeshua, or Jesus, and the stories say he has put down his tools. He has walked away from his family's workshop and has begun to speak in the synagogues and on the hillsides. This is the mainstream historical fact of his life. He was a Tekton from Nazareth, a craftsman. You try to picture him at his old work, and historians still debate the precise nature of that work. The word Tekton can mean a carpenter, a man who makes plows, yokes, and simple furniture. Or it could mean something more like a builder, a man who also worked with the stones that are so much more common here than good wood. Whatever he was, a carpenter, a stonemason, a builder, he is not that anymore. The story you hear is that he went down to the Jordan River to see the wild man, John the Baptist, that strange and terrifying prophet who lived in the desert. He was baptized by John in the river, and when he came back to Galilee, something about him had changed. He began to teach, and the things he is reported to be saying are strange, both beautiful and unsettling. He is not calling for soldiers to drive out the Romans. He is talking about something he calls the kingdom of God. And he says this kingdom is not some far-off future event, but is already here at hand, available to everyone. He says the poor are blessed, not the rich. He says the meek, not the powerful, will inherit the earth. It is an upside-down message. It makes no logical sense in the hard, hierarchical world you live in, and yet it sparks a flicker of something in your weary heart. You hear he has even gathered a few men to follow him. Not scholars, not priests, not men of influence, just a handful of local fishermen like your neighbors, Simon and Andrew. The story is that he just walked up to them as they were casting their nets and said 2 words, "Follow me." And they dropped their nets, their livelihoods, their families, and they followed him. The sheer, unadorned simplicity of the story is what makes it so compelling. The rumors continue. People say he will be speaking tomorrow on the hillside just outside your town, and you find you can no longer ignore it. You are tired of the Roman taxes. tired of the endless religious rules that seem to crush the spirit rather than lift it, tired of the heat and the dust and the hopelessness of it all. You want to hear this carpenter's voice for yourself, so you make a quiet decision. You put down your own tools, your net, your hammer. You tell your family you are just going to the next town and you will be back by evening. And you start to walk. You join a small but growing stream of other curious people, farmers, weavers, laborers, all heading out of the town and toward the hill. You do not know what you are looking for. You are not expecting a king or a general or a high priest. You are just going to listen to a carpenter who has put down his tools and started talking. You are walking towards a story, not yet knowing that the world will one day claim it is the greatest story ever told. You sit on the dry, sun-baked grass of the hillside, and you listen. The carpenter from Nazareth speaks, and his voice is calm and clear. He doesn't speak like the scribes or the Pharisees, with complex arguments about the law. He speaks of everyday things, of birds and flowers and farmers and fishermen. He tells you that the kingdom of God is like a tiny mustard seed that grows into a great tree. He tells you that you should not worry about tomorrow. His message is simple, direct, and it bypasses the part of your brain that understands theology and speaks directly to the part of your soul that is weary and longs for hope. When he finishes, the crowd begins to break up. People start heading back to their homes, their jobs, their ordinary lives, discussing the strange and beautiful things they have just heard. You know that you should do the same. Your fishing nets are waiting. Your family will be expecting you for the evening meal. But as you watch the carpenter and his small, core group of followers, the fishermen he called from the shore, start walking down a different path, one that leads not back to your town, but away into the rolling hills, a strange impulse takes hold of you. You do not turn for home. You stand up, brush the dust from your tunic, and you follow them. You quickly learn the first and most fundamental truth of this new life. It is, above all else, about walking. This is the mainstream historical fact that defines the entire ministry of Jesus. It was itinerant. He was constantly on the move. You quickly realize there is no schedule, no tour guide, and no map. The plan is simply to walk and to talk to whoever will listen along the way. The sun beats down on the back of your neck. The dry, white dust of the Galilean road gets into your throat, your eyes, your very clothes. Your feet, protected only by simple leather sandals, are soon raw with blisters. This is the quirky but ever-present reality of your journey. The state of your feet becomes a constant, low-grade source of misery. This is not a gentle stroll. It's an unplanned, multi-day hiking trip with very poor footwear. The paths you walk are not the grand, stone-paved roads the Roman legions use, and historians and archaeologists still debate the exact routes Jesus would have taken. Did he use the main roads to reach more people? Or did he, as you are doing now, stick to the smaller, unpaved dirt tracks that wound between the isolated villages, far from the watchful eyes of the Roman patrols and the Herodian tax collectors? This path feels quieter, more intimate, a road that belongs to the common people. You look around at your new companions. It's a strange and motley crew. The handful of fishermen who were his first followers, a few other men, a number of women who seem to be providing for the group out of their own means, and other stragglers like yourself who have been drawn in by the power of his words. It's not exactly the A-Team. There is no grand strategy. There is just the simple, daily reality of putting one foot in front of the other. At the end of the first day, your muscles scream in protest. You are more tired than you have ever been in your life, and you are hungry. This is when you learn the second fundamental truth of this life. You are utterly dependent on the hospitality of strangers. You arrive, dusty and exhausted, at a small village as the sun is setting. Jesus seems to know someone here, or perhaps someone knows of him. A family opens their small home to your entire group. You are given water to wash your filthy feet, and you share a simple meal of bread, olives, and cheese. eaten while sitting on the floor. It is the most delicious meal you have ever tasted. You are shown a spot on the rooftop where you can unroll your cloak and sleep under the stars. Some nights are like this, but other nights no door opens. On those nights, you sleep in an olive grove with a rock for a pillow, and you wake up cold, stiff, and still hungry. Days blur into a simple, monotonous, and profound rhythm. You wake at dawn, you walk, you listen to Jesus teach in the next village, you eat whatever is offered, you sleep, you wake up and you walk again. The great, earth-shaking, theological ideas you heard on the hillside are now grounded in the deeply boring, deeply physical reality of tired legs and blistered feet. You are beginning to understand. This kingdom of God he speaks of is not a golden city you are walking toward. It is something you are meant to find right here, on the road. It is in the shared loaf of bread. It is in the unexpected kindness of a stranger. It is in the simple act of walking together, a small, hopeful community moving through a hard and unforgiving world. You have left your life behind for an existence of profound uncertainty and physical exhaustion. But as you walk, the dust of the road coating your skin, you feel a strange sense of lightness, a freedom you have never known. After days of walking the dusty backroads, your small, itinerant group arrives in a larger town, perhaps Capernaum, a bustling fishing hub on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. As always, you are tired, hungry, and covered in a fine layer of pale dust. You follow Jesus as he makes his way through the crowded marketplace, past the stalls selling dried fish, spices, and pottery. You assume you are on your way to the local synagogue, or to the home of a respectable person who will offer your group a place to rest. Instead, Jesus stops at one of the most hated and avoided places in the entire town. The tax collector's booth. You have been taught your whole life that there are two things certain in life: death, and that everyone, absolutely everyone, hates tax collectors. They are Jews who work for the Roman occupiers, extracting money from their own people to give to a foreign power. They are seen as traitors, collaborators, and are considered ritually unclean. No respectable person would ever associate with them. The tax collector, a man named Levi, looks up from his accounts, his face a mixture of surprise and suspicion as Jesus approaches him. And then Jesus does something that makes you and everyone else in the marketplace stop and stare. He speaks to Levi, and then he invites him to share a meal. Levi, completely stunned, accepts, and wanting to return the honor, offers to host the meal at his own house. A few hours later, you find yourself walking into Levi's home, and you realize with a growing sense of unease that the guest list for this meal is a veritable who's who of people you have been taught to avoid. It is Levi and all his tax collector friends, and a number of other men and women whose reputations are, to put it mildly, questionable. It is a public relations nightmare. You look around for the other disciples, and you see the same discomfort on their faces. This is the mainstream historical fact that so defined and scandalized the ministry of Jesus, his practice of table fellowship with outcasts. In your culture, sharing a meal with someone is a profound act of acceptance, intimacy, and union. It means you are declaring them to be part of your community, part of your family. To eat with sinners is to become complicit in their sin. The seating arrangement itself is a quirky and intimate detail of the era. You do not sit on chairs around a high table. You recline on cushions on the floor, propped up on one elbow around a low, central table. You are all in close physical proximity, sharing from common dishes of stewed lentils, olives, and bread. You find yourself reclining next to a man whose job it is to take your money and give it to the Romans. It is deeply, profoundly uncomfortable, but Jesus is completely at ease. He is laughing, telling stories, breaking bread, and sharing wine with this roomful of society's rejects as if they were his oldest and dearest friends. And you try to understand what is happening. This is a question that sociologists and New Testament scholars still debate. What is the primary significance of these scandalous meals? Is it simply an act of radical social protest against the purity rules of the temple? Is it a living parable, a demonstration of God's unconditional grace? Or is it an eschatological sign, a dramatic foretaste of the great upside-down banquet that will take place in the coming kingdom of God, where the last will be first? As the meal continues, you become aware of a presence at the open doorway. A group of local Pharisees, the respected and devout religious leaders of the town, are standing there, watching the scene with expressions of undisguised horror. They are taking notes for what will surely be a very strongly worded letter to the editor. One of them finally calls out in a loud, accusatory voice, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" The room falls silent. Jesus, who has overheard, turns his head toward the men in the doorway. He doesn't shout back. He doesn't argue. He says, his voice calm and clear, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." The words hang in the air. You look around the room again, at the faces of these men and women, people you have been trained your whole life to judge and despise. And you realize you are witnessing the very heart of this strange man's message. The voice of God, the presence of God, is not to be found in the exclusive company of the pure and the righteous. It is to be found here. In the messy, scandalous, joyful, and deeply human company of the broken, the lost, and the excluded, you reach for a piece of bread, you tear it in two, and you offer half to the tax collector reclining beside you. He looks at you, surprised, and then he smiles and accepts it. It is the most radical and liberating act of your entire life. You leave the tax collector's house, your mind still reeling from the scandalous, joyful meal. You are beginning to think you understand the nature of this carpenter's message. It is about inclusion, about breaking down the social walls that keep people apart. You are walking along the dusty road, leaving the town behind, feeling a strange new sense of the world's possibilities. And then you hear a sound that makes your blood run cold. It is the faint, rhythmic clatter of a wooden clapper, a sound designed to warn people from a distance. It is followed by a hoarse, strained voice, crying out the most dreaded words in your language. "Unclean, unclean." Everyone in your small group instinctively stops and pulls to the side of the road. Up ahead, a man is approaching. You can see at a glance what he is. He is a leper. This is the mainstream historical fact of your world. A person with a skin disease is not just sick. They are a religious and social outcast of the highest order. He is a walking ghost. He adheres to the quirky and terrible laws laid out in the holy books. His clothes are torn as a sign of permanent mourning for his own life. His hair is unkempt. He has a cloth covering his lower face. His legally mandated personal alarm system, the clapper, warns of his contaminated presence. You have been taught your entire life to stay away, that to even have his shadow fall upon you is a source of defilement. The crowd of travelers on the road parts for him as if he were a rock in a stream, leaving a wide, empty space all around him. He has a condition that makes people practice extreme social distancing with an almost religious fervor. You look at the man's exposed skin on his hands and forehead. It is covered in white, flaky patches. And you find yourself thinking about something you've heard whispered. Historians and medical anthropologists still debate the precise nature of this biblical leprosy. Was it the contagious and debilitating Hansen's disease you've always feared? Or was the term used for a whole range of disfiguring but non-contagious skin conditions like psoriasis or vitiligo? Was the extreme social exclusion based on a real fear of contagion, or on a deep, primal revulsion to imperfection, a fear of ritual impurity? As you are contemplating this, the leper does something unthinkable. Instead of keeping his distance, he walks directly towards your group, towards Jesus. He stops a few paces away and falls to his knees in the dust, and he speaks, his voice raspy. "Lord," he says, "if you are willing, you can make me climb." A tense silence falls. You and the other followers hold your breath. You expect Jesus to offer a prayer, perhaps to speak a word of healing from a safe and respectable distance. Instead, he does something so shocking, so profoundly taboo, that you feel a collective gasp ripple through your small group. He steps forward. He closes the distance between the clean and the unclean, and he reaches out his hand. He touches the man. His healthy fingers make contact with the man's diseased skin. In your world, this act is not just a health code violation, it is a spiritual one. According to the law, by touching that which is unclean, Jesus has now made himself unclean. He has willingly, deliberately, taken the man's ritual impurity onto himself. He has crossed a sacred line that has defined your society for 1,000 years. Only after the touch does he speak. "I am willing," he says, his voice soft. "Be clean." You watch, mesmerized, as a change seems to come over the kneeling man. But in your mind, the true miracle has already happened. The most powerful moment was not the healing itself, but the touch that preceded it. The touch that said, "You are not an outcast to me. You are not your disease. You are a person." You look at Jesus's hand, the hand that just touched the untouchable, and you realize you have just learned a deeper lesson. The meal with the tax collectors was about breaking down social barriers. This is about breaking down the barriers between the pure and the impure, the holy and the profane, the sacred and the sick. This is about a God who is not afraid of your contamination, who does not shrink away from your brokenness, but who willingly reaches into it. The former leper is looking at his own hands, his own skin, tears of disbelief streaming down his face. But you are looking at Jesus, and you understand that the divine voice you have chosen to follow does not only speak in parables and sermons. It speaks in gestures. It speaks in a simple human touch that defies every law and every taboo to communicate a love that has no boundaries. The most powerful sermon you have heard all day contained no words at all. The act of the touch, the healing of the leper, is a sermon without words that leaves you and the other followers in a state of stunned silence. The message seems to be one of a radical, fearless compassion that transcends even the holiest of laws. You continue your journey, and a few days later, you arrive in another small village. Word of the strange new teacher has spread, and a crowd quickly gathers on a dusty patch of ground at the edge of the town. You sit on the ground, listening to the buzz of the crowd. It is a mixed audience. There are simple villagers, their faces open and curious. There are a few women trying to hush their children. And there is a small, distinct group of men standing at the back, their arms crossed, their faces stern and disapproving. These are Pharisees, devout and learned men from the local synagogue. They are the self-appointed fact-checkers of the group, here to listen for any hint of heresy in the carpenter's words, and they are rarely impressed. One of these Pharisees, emboldened by the presence of his colleagues, calls out, repeating the same accusation you heard in the last town. "We hear you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners," he says, his voice dripping with contempt. "Why do you do this?" The crowd falls silent. A tense energy fills the air. You expect Jesus to enter into a complex theological debate, to quote the scriptures and argue points of the law. Instead, he just looks at the Pharisee, then at the rest of the crowd, and he begins to tell a story. This is his method, you are learning. The divine voice through him often speaks in parables. "Which one of you," he begins, his voice calm and clear, "if you had 100 sheep and lost one of them, would not leave the 99 in the open pasture and go out to find the one that is lost until you find it?" You listen, and as someone who has grown up around shepherds, your first thought is that the story makes no sense. No shepherd you know would ever do that. To leave the entire flock, 99 sheep, vulnerable to wolves and thieves, just to find one stupid animal that was careless enough to get itself lost. It's madness, it's terrible risk management. You would cut your losses, protect the 99, and mourn the one. The premise of his story is intentionally, provocatively illogical from a practical human standpoint. But Jesus continues, his voice gentle, and when he has found it, he says, he does not scold it or beat it. He lays it joyfully on his shoulders and carries it home. And when he arrives home, he calls together his friends and neighbors and says to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." He pauses, letting the image settle in the minds of the crowd. Then he delivers the meaning. "I tell you," he says, looking directly at the Pharisees, "in the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance." The story is over, a quiet falls, and you are left to grapple with what you have just heard. This is the mystery of the parables, a topic New Testament scholars still debate. Were these just simple moral fables, easy for an uneducated audience to understand? Or were they something much more profound, what some have called language events, designed to completely shatter the listener's preconceived notions of the world and invite them into a new, upside-down reality? You look at the faces of the Pharisees, and you can see their anger and confusion. The story is a direct rebuke to their worldview, which is based on righteousness, purity, and separating oneself from the lost. Then you look at the faces of the common people, the poor and the struggling, and you see a flicker of a different emotion, a dawning of a new and radical hope. The meaning of the story arrives in your mind, not like a point in a lecture, but like the punchline to a very quiet, very profound joke. The shepherd in the story is God, and God, it turns out, is a terrible risk manager. God is the one who is so obsessed with the one lost thing that he will leave the 99 righteous, safe, and respectable people behind to go searching in the wilderness. His love is not logical, it is not efficient. It is a reckless, searching, and joyful love, a love that throws a party when the one who was lost is found. You have learned another way the divine voice can be heard. It is not always a terrifying roar of thunder, or a law carved in stone, or even a shocking physical touch. Sometimes the voice of God is a simple story, a gentle fiction that slips past all your logical defenses and plants a revolutionary seed in your heart. It is a voice that teaches not by command, but by invitation, an invitation to see yourself, your world, and God himself in a completely new and unexpected light. After the intensity of the confrontation with the Pharisees and the quiet profundity of the parable, your group finds a place to rest in the shade of a few olive trees. The afternoon is hot, and Jesus looks weary. The constant walking, teaching, and the sheer emotional energy of engaging with the crowds is taking its toll. You and the other followers, especially the inner circle like Simon Peter and the brothers James and John, are beginning to see yourselves as more than just followers. You are becoming a committee, the managers of this very important, very serious new enterprise, and your primary job, as you see it, is to protect the teacher's time and energy. As you are resting, you see a group of women from the nearby village approaching. They are holding the hands of their small children and carrying their infants. They are a noisy, chattering, and disruptive force, a jumble of dusty feet, tangled hair, and loud, happy squeals. They are heading directly for Jesus. Your committee immediately springs into action. You and several of the other disciples stand up and move to intercept them, holding up your hands to stop them. Your logic is simple and practical. The teacher is tired. He has been speaking all day. He needs to rest. He is engaged in the deeply important work of teaching adults about the kingdom of God. He cannot be bothered by a gaggle of unimportant, noisy children. They are, in your mind, a low-priority interruption, like an unrequested pop-up ad. In the ancient world, this attitude is perfectly normal. This is the mainstream historical fact that makes the scene so powerful. Children have little to no social status. They are legally powerless, often seen as little more than the property of their fathers. They are not considered important individuals whose thoughts or needs are worthy of a great teacher's time. You know what the mothers want. This is a quirky and common piece of folk piety. They want to bring their children to this man they believe is holy so that he might touch them. A blessing from a holy man was believed to confer protection and spiritual benefit, and they want this for their children. To you, it seems like a sentimental and superstitious distraction from the real, serious work at hand. You tell the women, perhaps a bit sternly, that the master is tired and they should go home. As you are trying to shoo them away, Jesus sees what is happening, and you see an expression come over his face that surprises you. It is not weariness, it is indignation. He is genuinely angry, but not at the women. He is angry at you, his own followers. He calls out, his voice sharp and clear. "Let the little children come to me," he says, "and do not hinder them." He waves you and the other self-important disciples aside. Then he says the words that completely shatter your understanding of power, status, and importance. "For the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly, I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." It is a complete reversal of the entry requirements for any exclusive club. The kingdom, it turns out, is not for the wise, the powerful, the righteous, or the important. It is for those who have the dependent, trusting, and unimportant status of a child. As you ponder this, historians of childhood still debate the precise social standing of children in your world. Were they universally disregarded, or were they cherished within the family unit in ways that are lost to the historical record? What you know for sure is that in the public, adult world of serious religious business, they were considered a nuisance. Jesus sits down on the dusty ground, and he calls the children to him. He is not their teacher in this moment. He is their friend. He pulls a small, shy girl onto his lap. He ruffles the hair of a rowdy little boy. He takes an infant from its mother's arms and holds it. He places his hands on their small heads, and one by one, he blesses them. He is not bothered. He is not distracted. He is completely, joyfully present with them. You stand back, feeling a deep sense of shame. You thought you were being helpful. You thought you were protecting his important work. But you have just been taught that what you considered an unimportant distraction was, in his eyes, the very heart of the work. You were trying to manage a kingdom based on adult principles of efficiency, importance, and order. He is building one based on childlike humility, openness, and trust. You have learned that the divine voice speaks not only in challenging parables, but in small, gentle gestures of welcome. You have learned that the attention of God is not reserved for the serious and the devout. It is given freely, joyfully, to the small, the noisy, the powerless, and those whom the world considers to be the least important of all. Children begins to drift away, heading back to their homes for the evening meal. Jesus looks out across the water of the great lake, the Sea of Galilee. The crowds have been growing larger every day, more demanding. He tells your small group that he wants to cross to the other side, to find a quieter place to rest and pray. Simon Peter, the fisherman, nods. It is his boat, after all, that often serves as the group's unofficial transport. This is the mainstream historical fact that grounds so much of your journey. You are in the heart of fishing country, and the boats and skills of the fishermen disciples are the essential logistics that make this itinerant ministry possible. You all make your way down to the shore where Peter's boat is moored. It is not a large vessel. This is a quirky detail that archaeology has confirmed. A boat discovered in the mud of the Galilee from this very period shows that a typical fishing boat was a simple, open vessel, perhaps 27 feet long, powered by a small sail and oars. It could hold about 15 men, but it would be a tight squeeze. With Jesus and the 12, plus a few other followers like yourself, you are all crammed in together, your knees practically touching. The accommodations are not exactly five-star. Your seat for the crossing is a coil of rough, damp rope that smells strongly of fish. As twilight descends, you push off from the shore. The lake is calm, its surface like dark, polished glass. The air grows cool. You can hear the rhythmic creak and splash of the oars in the water, and the soft conversations of the other disciples. They are debating the meaning of one of the parables, or arguing about which village you should visit next. They are the management committee, still hard at work, but Jesus is not part of the conversation. He makes his way to the stern of the boat, where a boatman might keep a leather cushion. He sits down, leans his head back against the stern post, and within moments he is fast asleep. It is not a light nap. It is the deep, profound, and immediate sleep of a man who is utterly and completely exhausted. You sit in the gently rocking boat and you watch him. This is, in many ways, the most startling and intimate sight you have yet seen. You have seen him command the attention of a crowd with a quiet story. You have seen him touch a leper with fearless compassion. You have seen him look into the eyes of a Pharisee with an authority that is terrifying. But now, you see him simply as a tired man. His mouth is slightly open. His breathing is deep and regular. He is oblivious to the chatter of his followers, to the movement of the boat, to the entire world. And as you watch him, you are witnessing a scene that gets to the very heart of the mystery of this man, a question that historians and psychologists still debate. What was the nature of his self-awareness? Did he experience the world with the same physical and emotional frailties as any other human being? Did he feel the bone-deep weariness that you feel in your own aching muscles? Or did his divine nature somehow insulate him from the common pains of mortal life? Looking at him now, sleeping the sleep of the utterly spent, the answer seems obvious. You realize that even if he is divine, his human battery still needs recharging. The boat continues its slow journey across the dark, quiet water. The moon rises, casting a silver path across the lake. The disciples' conversations die down, and a peaceful silence settles over your small, crowded vessel. The only sounds are the gentle lapping of the water against the wooden hull and the soft, rhythmic breathing of the sleeping carpenter in the stern. In sleep, his face looks different. The lines of intensity and concentration are gone. The weight of his mission seems to have lifted for a few hours. He looks younger and profoundly vulnerable. You are struck by the immense paradox that is floating in this boat with you. The man whom some are beginning to believe is the very presence of God on earth, the Word made flesh, is drooling slightly onto a fisherman's cushion, completely lost to the world. And it is in this moment that you understand. His divinity, whatever it is, does not erase his humanity. It works through it. You spend the night on the water, cramped and uncomfortable, but it is one of the most peaceful experiences of your journey so far. Watching him sleep, you have learned something new about the divine. The voice of God is not always teaching, not always healing, not always challenging. Sometimes the voice of God is silent. Sometimes it is tired. And sometimes it simply needs to rest. The boat glides into a small, deserted cove on the eastern shore of the lake, a place far from the bustling towns and curious crowds. You and the other followers spend the night there, on the shore, wrapped in your cloaks. The sleep that comes after a long day of walking and sailing is heavy, but the hard ground is an unforgiving mattress. Long before the sun is up, you find yourself awake, the cool, pre-dawn air on your face. The other disciples are still sleeping, a collection of huddled, snoring shapes in the gloom. Unable to get back to sleep, you stand up and take a quiet walk along the shore. A faint, gray light is just beginning to soften the eastern horizon. The world is utterly still and silent, save for the gentle lapping of the water and the first, tentative chirp of an awakening bird. As your eyes adjust to the half-light, you see a solitary figure standing further up the hillside, silhouetted against the coming dawn. It is Jesus. You stop immediately, instinctively hiding behind a large boulder. You know, without being told, that you are intruding on a private moment. He has deliberately woken long before everyone else and has sought out this lonely place. This is the mainstream historical fact that peppers the story of his life, his constant habit of withdrawing to a deserted place, to a mountainside or a lonely shore to pray. You have seen prayer your whole life. You have seen the Pharisees pray in the marketplaces, their voices loud and their gestures grand, making sure everyone sees their piety. You have heard the formal, magnificent prayers of the priests in the temple, a sacred and public ritual. This is nothing like that. This is quiet. It is solitary. It is secret. He is not performing for an audience. He is simply standing there, his head bowed. You are too far away to hear most of his words, which he seems to be whispering. But then a breeze drifts down the hillside, and it carries a single word to your ears. It is the Aramaic word he uses to begin his prayer, Abba. This is a quirky and profoundly shocking detail. Abba is not the formal, reverent word for father that is used in the synagogue. It is the intimate, familiar word a small child uses for their daddy, a word of absolute trust and closeness. To address the great, unseen God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with such familiar intimacy is a radical act. You continue to watch, hidden by your rock. What is he doing? What is the function of this prayer? This is a question that theologians and historians still debate. Is he, in this moment, a human petitioning a separate, all-powerful God, asking for guidance or strength? Or is this something different, a moment of deep communion, a quiet alignment of his human consciousness with the divine where he already embodies? Is he talking to God, or is he simply being with God in a way you cannot comprehend? He stays there for what feels like an hour, a still, dark shape against the slowly brightening sky. The rising sun begins to cast long shadows from the rocks. You realize with a sudden clarity that you are witnessing the source of everything you have seen. This is where the power comes from. This is the origin of the calm authority in his voice, the fearless compassion in his touch, the unsettling wisdom in his stories. It is not drawn from a school of philosophy or a library of holy books. It is drawn from these secret, silent, pre-dawn encounters. This is where he recharges his spiritual battery, away from the endless, draining demands of the crowds and the bickering of his own followers. As the sun finally clears the horizon, painting the clouds pink and orange, he finishes his prayer. He stands for a moment, looking out at the new day, and then he turns to walk back down towards your sleeping camp. You quickly and quietly slip away, hurrying back to your cloak on the ground, closing your eyes and feigning sleep just as he arrives. You lie there, listening to him gently wake the others. You have learned another secret about the divine voice you are following. It is not always a public proclamation. It is not always for the benefit of the crowd. Its deepest form might just be a quiet, intimate conversation, a whisper that can only be heard in the absolute solitude of the dawn, before the rest of the world has woken up. You have been allowed a brief, accidental glimpse of the engine room, the quiet power source that makes the entire journey possible. After the quiet intimacy of the pre-dawn prayer, you return to the loud, demanding reality of the crowds. Your group is back in a house in Capernaum, and Jesus is teaching again, but his popularity has now reached a fever pitch. The house is so packed with people, so dense with bodies all straining to hear him, that there is no room to move. The air is hot and stale. You and the other disciples, pressed into a corner, realize you haven't had a chance to eat all day. The work has become so all-consuming that there is no time even for a simple meal. Suddenly, there is a commotion at the doorway. A small group of people are trying to push their way through the throng, but the crowd is too thick. You hear urgent voices from the outside. A message begins to pass from person to person. a whispered sentence relayed through the packed room until it reaches the man sitting next to Jesus. He leans over and says, "Your mother and your brothers are outside. They are asking for you." You are surprised. You have been following this man for weeks now, and you have never seen his family. They are not part of your traveling group. They have remained in their village, Nazareth. You feel a flicker of excitement. His mother is here. But then you hear the rest of the whispers, the reason for their unexpected arrival, and your excitement turns to a deep sense of unease. The rumors you hear from the people at the door are shocking. His family has come because they think he is out of his mind. They have heard the stories, that he has abandoned his respectable trade, that he is wandering the countryside with a group of fishermen, that he is eating with outcasts and challenging the most powerful religious leaders in the land. They have concluded that he has gone mad, and they have come to take charge of him, to take him home, to put an end to this public embarrassment before he gets himself arrested, or worse. They have come to stage an intervention. You look towards the doorway and see the anxious face of one of his brothers, craning his neck to try to see into the crowded room, and you are witnessing a profoundly human drama, a tension that historians and sociologists still debate. What is the primary motivation for his family's actions? Is it purely loving concern for his well-being, a genuine fear that he has lost his sanity under the pressure of his new calling? Or is it also driven by a deep sense of social obligation, a need to protect the family's honor from the scandal their strange and rebellious son is causing? Everyone in the hot, stuffy room turns to look at Jesus, expecting him to stop his teaching, to excuse himself and go outside to greet his mother and brothers. It is the normal, expected, and honorable thing to do. Instead, he does something completely unexpected. He looks around the room, not at the doorway, but at the faces of the people packed in around him. He looks at you, at the other disciples, at the poor farmers and the curious women who have come to listen, and he asks a question to the room at large. "Who," he says, his voice clear, "are my mother and my brothers?" A confused silence falls. Before anyone can answer, he gestures with his hand, a sweeping motion that takes in everyone sitting on the floor around him. "Here," he says, "are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." It is a stunning, almost brutal declaration. He is, in that moment, redefining the very concept of family. He is placing the bonds of this new, chosen community, this strange family of faith united by a shared mission, above the most sacred and ancient bonds of blood and kinship. It's a tough moment at what should have been a family reunion. You are not witnessing a theological debate now. You are witnessing a raw, painful, and deeply human family conflict. You can imagine the hurt and confusion on his mother's face as his words are relayed back to her outside. You see the mixture of determination and sadness in his own eyes. The divine voice you are learning does not operate in a peaceful vacuum. It exists within the messy, complicated, and often painful web of normal human relationships. Answering that call, it seems, can mean making choices that cause pain to the very people you love, choices that make your own family think you have lost your mind. The divine voice can build a new kind of family, but it can also strain the old one to its breaking point. You look from the face of Jesus, surrounded by his new family of followers, to the doorway where his first family stands, worried and unable to reach him. After the tense and awkward encounter with his family, your group is back on the road. There is a new, unspoken dynamic in the air. You are beginning to understand that this journey requires a severing of old ties, a commitment to a new kind of family. The days are long and hot, and the conversations are often punctuated by long stretches of silence, just the sound of your feet and the ever-present Galilean dust. One morning, you are walking on the road that leads up towards Jerusalem. It is early, and none of you have eaten yet. Your stomach is rumbling. The group's catering budget is, as always, precisely zero. You are all living on what you can find or what is offered to you. Ahead on the road, you all see a welcome sight, a large, solitary fig tree, its branches full of lush, green leaves. A leafy fig tree is a sign of promise. It suggests that, nestled amongst the leaves, there should be fruit. Jesus, who seems to be as hungry as the rest of you, walks over to the tree, expecting to find something to eat. You and the others stop, watching with anticipation. A few fresh figs would be a welcome relief from the monotony of stale bread. He reaches the tree and begins to search through its branches. From a distance, it looked so full of life and potential. But as he parts the leaves, a look of disappointment crosses his face. There is nothing, not a single fig. It is a tree of appearance only, all leaves and no fruit. He turns away from the tree, and you expect him to simply walk on, perhaps with a sigh of disappointment. Instead, something else happens. A flash of real, sharp anger appears in his eyes. He turns back to the tree, and he speaks to it directly, his voice hard and sharp. "May no one ever eat fruit from you again," he says. The words hang in the hot, still air. It is not a lament, it is a curse. You are completely taken aback. This is the mainstream historical fact of the event, one that has puzzled theologians for 2,000 years. And what makes it even stranger is the quirky detail you and everyone else from this region knows instinctively. It wasn't even the proper season for figs. The tree wasn't failing to do something it was supposed to be doing. It was simply following the natural, predictable rhythm of its own species. Jesus is angry at a tree for behaving like a tree. You and the other disciples are utterly bewildered. This is the man who showed infinite patience with noisy children, who touched the untouchable skin of a leper, who shared his table with the most despised members of society. And now he is displaying a hot, seemingly irrational flash of temper, directed at an inanimate object for following the laws of nature. It's a disproportionate response. The tree has failed to perform its one job at that particular moment, and it's getting a truly terrible performance review. You all exchange confused looks, the ancient equivalent of a group text chain that just says, "This single strange event is so out of character that New Testament scholars have proposed countless interpretations for it over the centuries. Was it a simple, relatable moment of human frustration, of hangriness, anger born from hunger and disappointment? Was it a deliberate, symbolic sign act, a piece of prophetic theater meant to represent his coming judgment on the religious establishment in Jerusalem, which he saw as being all leaves, outward piety, and no fruit, true justice? Was it a living parable, a warning to his own followers about the importance of bearing spiritual fruit? In that moment, standing on the dusty road, you have no grand theological interpretation. You just see a man who you admire, your teacher, doing something confusing and unsettling. You all walk on in an awkward silence, leaving the fig tree behind. The incident is dropped. Later that day, you enter Jerusalem, and the incident is forgotten amidst the noise and chaos of the city. The next day, as you are leaving the city, you happen to walk back along the same road. Peter, walking ahead of you, suddenly stops and points. "Rabbi, look," he says, his voice full of astonishment. "The fig tree you cursed has withered." You look, and a chill runs through you. The tree that yesterday was full of lush, green leaves is now a dry, brown, skeletal husk. It is completely dead from the roots up. His angry words were not just an expression of frustration. They carried a real and devastating power. You are confronted with a new and disturbing aspect of the man you are following. You have seen his power to heal, to include, to teach. Now, for the first time, you have seen that power used to wither and destroy. You have learned that the divine voice is not always comforting, and the divine nature is not always gentle. It can be sharp, impatient, and utterly mysterious. It reminds you that you do not truly understand this man at all. You are in the upper room in Jerusalem. The quiet, intimate act of the foot washing has left you and the other disciples in a state of contemplative silence. The meal is on the table, but the atmosphere is thick with a heavy, unspoken sorrow. Jesus has been speaking of betrayal and his own departure, and a cold sense of dread begins to creep into your heart. As you look at the simple loaf of bread on the table, your mind drifts back to a seemingly simpler time on the road a few months ago, to another moment of hunger that now seems charged with a new and profound meaning. You remember the day clearly. It was the Sabbath, the holy day of rest. Your small group was walking along a narrow path that cut directly through a field of ripe barley. The sun was warm, and the heads of grain, dry and golden, rustled in the gentle breeze. It had been a long morning of walking, and you were all hungry. The small amount of bread you'd had at dawn was long gone. It was a simple, thoughtless act. As you walked, you and a few of the other disciples reached out and plucked a handful of the ripe grain. You were not stealing. The law allowed for a traveler to take a small amount from the edge of a field. You held the heads of grain in your palms and rubbed them together briskly, separating the light, useless chaff from the heavy, nutritious kernels. Then you blew the chaff away and popped the raw kernels into your mouth. They were chewy and had a nutty, earthy flavor. It was a simple, rustic snack, the act of hungry men walking through a world of abundance. You were not robbing a bank. You were committing the heinous crime of making a snack. And then, as if from nowhere, they appeared. A small group of Pharisees. They seemed to have a special talent for materializing out of thin air whenever a minor religious infraction was about to occur. They had likely been following your group, just waiting for a misstep, and you have just given them one. One of them points a sharp, accusing finger. "Look," he says to Jesus, his voice filled with triumphant indignation. "Why are your disciples doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" You freeze the grains half chewed in your mouth. You have been caught. You have forgotten the complexities of the law. This is the mainstream historical fact that governed every aspect of your life. The Sabbath was governed by a strict set of rules, an oral tradition passed down by the elders that defined exactly what constituted work. And you have just performed two kinds of forbidden labor. By plucking the grain from the stalk, you were guilty of reaping. By rubbing it in your hands, you were guilty of thrashing. You have broken the holy Sabbath. You feel a hot flush of shame. You have brought trouble upon your teacher. You look at Jesus, expecting him to be disappointed, expecting him to apologize to the Pharisees on your behalf. His entire relationship with the law is a mystery, a topic that historians and theologians still debate. Is he a pious reformer, trying to get back to the true spirit of the law, or is he a radical challenger, one who places his own authority above the sacred text itself? Jesus looks at the angry faces of the Pharisees. Then he looks at your own worried, hungry face. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't tell you to stop. He defends you. He calmly reminds the Pharisees of a story from the holy books, a story about King David himself. When David and his men were hungry and on the run, they entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, the bread of the presence, which was lawful only for priests to eat. He is, in effect, citing a historical precedent to win a legal argument about workplace snacking. Then, he delivers the principle behind his argument, a short, simple statement that is one of the most radical and revolutionary things you have ever heard him say. He looks the Pharisees in the eye. The Sabbath, he says, his voice quiet but firm, was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The statement is breathtaking. He has just taken 1,000 years of sacred tradition and stood it on its head. He is saying that the purpose of God's law is to serve human life, not the other way around. He concludes, "So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath," a claim of personal authority that leaves the Pharisees sputtering in angry, frustrated silence. Your memory of that sunny afternoon fades, and you are back in the dim, lamp-lit upper room. The incident seemed like a minor squabble at the time, but now you see it in a new light. It was a clear declaration of his entire mission. It was a statement about the very nature of the God he represents. The divine voice speaking through him is a voice that consistently, radically, and controversially prioritizes human need over religious rule, human compassion over ritual purity. The God he speaks for, it seems, is less concerned with the proper observance of a holy day than he is with the simple, undignified fact of his followers being hungry. The bread on the table in the upper room seems to dissolve in your mouth, tasteless. The memory of the Sabbath confrontation fades, replaced by another, much more recent and painful one. Your mind drifts back to just a few days ago, to the small village of Bethany, a short walk from this very city, and to the household of 3 siblings whom Jesus loves, Mary, Martha, and their brother, Lazarus. You remember the urgent message arriving while you were all teaching in a distant village. It was from the sisters. "Lord," the message said, "the one you love is sick." You all expected Jesus to drop everything and rush to his friend's side. Instead, in a move no one could understand, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. When he finally announced, "Let us go back to Judea," a wave of fear went through your group. But Rabbi, one of the disciples, objected. "A short while ago the authorities there tried to stone you, and you are going back." It felt like a suicide mission, the ancient equivalent of being told, "Let's go back to that place where they literally just tried to kill us." But he was resolved, and so you followed, your hearts heavy with dread. By the time you arrived in Bethany, it was too late. Lazarus was dead. He had already been in the tomb for 4 days. You are met on the road by Martha, and then by Mary. You are plunged into a scene of profound, unrestrained grief. The sisters are weeping. Their friends and neighbors from the village are weeping alongside them, and a group of professional mourners are wailing and crying out, as is the custom. Jesus asks to be taken to the tomb. You follow the weeping sisters through the village to the burial site. It is a cave hewn out of the rock, and a large, heavy stone has been rolled across the entrance to seal it. As Jesus stands before the tomb, surrounded by the sounds of uncontrollable sorrow, you watch his face. His expression tightens. The gospel writer John would later say he was deeply moved in spirit and greatly troubled. And then you see it, the man you have seen calm a crowd with a story, the man you have seen face down the religious authorities with fearless authority, the man who has spoken with a power that feels like it could shake the world, completely breaks down. His composure shatters. His body is racked with deep, shaking sobs. He weeps. It is not a silent, stoic tear rolling down his cheek. It is the raw, helpless, uncontrollable weeping of someone who has lost a person they deeply love. The crowd of mourners sees this and they murmur among themselves, "See how he loved him." And you know that is part of it, but as you watch him, you wonder if it is something more. This is a moment that theologians and literary critics will debate for millennia. What is the source of these tears? Are you witnessing the simple, relatable, human grief of a man devastated by the death of his friend? Are you seeing his empathy, his sorrow at seeing the pain of Mary and Martha? Or are you witnessing something even deeper, a divine sorrow, the grief of God himself, weeping for the entire human condition, for a world that is subject to the cruel finality of sickness, decay, and death? His voice when he finally speaks is thick with that same emotion. "Take away the stone," he commands. Martha, ever the pragmatist, objects immediately. "But Lord," she says, her voice full of a very real-world concern, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." "Take away the stone," he repeats. The men struggle to roll the heavy rock away from the mouth of the tomb, revealing a dark, cold opening. Jesus stands before that dark opening, his face still wet with tears, and he prays. And then he calls out, his voice no longer a whisper of grief, but a roar of command that seems to echo from the depths of creation. "Lazarus, come out." The miracle that happens next, is a story that will shake the world. But for you, in this moment, the memory that lodges itself in your soul, the one you are replaying in the quiet of the upper room, is not the miracle of the resurrection. It is the miracle of the tears. You have learned something profound. The divine voice can be a story, a touch, a quiet prayer, a challenge to the law, but it can also be the choked, ragged, entirely human sound of weeping. The God you are following is not a remote, philosophical principle immune to the pains of the world. He is not a stoic king, safe from suffering. He is a God who walks to the tomb of a friend and stands before the stone and cries. The bread on the table in the upper room seems to dissolve in your mouth, tasteless. The memory of the Sabbath confrontation fades, replaced by another, much more recent and painful one. Your mind drifts back to just a few days ago, to the small village of Bethany, a short walk from this very city, and to the household of 3 siblings whom Jesus loves, Mary, Martha, and their brother, Lazarus. You remember the urgent message arriving while you were all teaching in a distant village. It was from the sisters. "Lord," the message said, "the one you love is sick." You all expected Jesus to drop everything and rush to his friend's side. Instead, in a move no one could understand, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. When he finally announced, "Let us go back to Judea," a wave of fear went through your group. But Rabbi, one of the disciples, objected. "A short while ago the authorities there tried to stone you, and you are going back." It felt like a suicide mission, the ancient equivalent of being told, "Let's go back to that place where they literally just tried to kill us." But he was resolved, and so you followed, your hearts heavy with dread. By the time you arrived in Bethany, it was too late. Lazarus was dead. He had already been in the tomb for 4 days. You are met on the road by Martha, and then by Mary. You are plunged into a scene of profound, unrestrained grief. The sisters are weeping. Their friends and neighbors from the village are weeping alongside them, and a group of professional mourners are wailing and crying out, as is the custom. Jesus asks to be taken to the tomb. You follow the weeping sisters through the village to the burial site. It is a cave hewn out of the rock, and a large, heavy stone has been rolled across the entrance to seal it. As Jesus stands before the tomb, surrounded by the sounds of uncontrollable sorrow, you watch his face. His expression tightens. The gospel writer John would later say he was deeply moved in spirit and greatly troubled. And then you see it, the man you have seen calm a crowd with a story, the man you have seen face down the religious authorities with fearless authority, the man who has spoken with a power that feels like it could shake the world, completely breaks down. His composure shatters. His body is racked with deep, shaking sobs. He weeps. It is not a silent, stoic tear rolling down his cheek. It is the raw, helpless, uncontrollable weeping of someone who has lost a person they deeply love. The crowd of mourners sees this and they murmur among themselves, "See how he loved him." And you know that is part of it, but as you watch him, you wonder if it is something more. This is a moment that theologians and literary critics will debate for millennia. What is the source of these tears? Are you witnessing the simple, relatable, human grief of a man devastated by the death of his friend? Are you seeing his empathy, his sorrow at seeing the pain of Mary and Martha? Or are you witnessing something even deeper, a divine sorrow, the grief of God himself, weeping for the entire human condition, for a world that is subject to the cruel finality of sickness, decay, and death? His voice, when he finally speaks, is thick with that same emotion. "Take away the stone," he commands. Martha, ever the pragmatist, objects immediately. "But Lord," she says, her voice full of a very real-world concern, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." "Take away the stone," he repeats. The men struggle to roll the heavy rock away from the mouth of the tomb, revealing a dark, cold opening. Jesus stands before that dark opening, his face still wet with tears, and he prays. And then he calls out, his voice no longer a whisper of grief, but a roar of command that seems to echo from the depths of creation. Lazarus, come out. The miracle that happens next is a story that will shake the world. But for you, in this moment, the memory that lodges itself in your soul, the one you are replaying in the quiet of the upper room, is not the miracle of the resurrection. It is the miracle of the tears. You have learned something profound. The divine voice can be a story, a touch, a quiet prayer, a challenge to the law. But it can also be the choked, ragged, entirely human sound of weeping. The God you are following is not a remote, philosophical principle immune to the pains of the world. He is not a stoic king, safe from suffering. He is a God who walks to the tomb of a friend and stands before the stone and cries. Your memories of the road, the confrontations, the healings, the strange and powerful moments fade, and your consciousness returns to the present, to the quiet, lamplit upper room in Jerusalem. The foot washing is over. You are all back at the low table, reclining on your cushions, and the final meal begins. This is not just any meal. It is the Passover Seder, the most sacred and ancient ritual meal of your people. This is the mainstream historical fact that gives this night its deep, layered meaning. The meal itself is a story, a celebration of freedom from slavery in Egypt. On the table are the familiar, symbolic foods. The flat, unleavened bread that your ancestors ate in their haste to escape, the bitter herbs to remind you of the bitterness of bondage, and the cups of dark, red wine. Normally, this is a time of joy, of family, of celebrating your people's history. But tonight, the atmosphere in the room is all wrong. A heavy, sorrowful silence hangs in the air. Jesus is withdrawn and troubled, and his mood infects all of you. No one knows what to say. It is the most uncomfortable dinner party you have ever attended. To break the terrible, awkward tension, you and the other disciples do something profoundly, embarrassingly human. You start to argue. Even now, with the air thick with foreboding, a petty squabble breaks out among you about which one of you is the most important, about who will hold the highest rank in the kingdom that you still expect him to establish. It is a moment of such comically bad timing, a testament to how little you all still understand. Jesus, hearing your argument, interrupts. He doesn't scold you. He just looks at you all with a deep, weary sadness. Then he picks up a piece of the flat, unleavened bread. He says the traditional blessing over it, but then he does something new, something that is not part of the ancient Passover ritual. He breaks the bread and he hands a piece to each of you. As he gives it to you, he says, his voice quiet but intense, "This is my body which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." You take the piece of bread, confused. It is a strange, symbolic thing to say. You eat it. It tastes only of bread. Later, after the main part of the meal is over, he takes one of the shared cups of wine. You are all reclining in the Roman style, propped up on your left elbow, which makes the sharing of a cup a very intimate act. This quirky detail of posture means that John, the disciple he loves, is able to lean back against Jesus' chest to ask him a quiet question. Jesus takes the cup, gives thanks, and passes it to you all, saying, "This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." You take a sip of the wine, but you are tasting a mystery. What do these words mean? A broken body, spilled blood, a new covenant. You are in the middle of a moment that will become the central ritual of a new world religion. But for you right now, it is just the sad, strange, and symbolic talk of a beloved teacher who seems to be saying goodbye. Historians and liturgists will continue to debate the precise words and actions of this night. How much of the later, complex theology was present in this original, sorrowful meal, and how much was understood only in hindsight. The meal ends, the strange new rituals are over. A new, even heavier silence descends on the room. You have shared a simple meal, an act you have done countless times in your life. But you know with a certainty that chills you to the bone that this meal was different. It felt like an ending. It felt final. Tonight, the divine voice did not speak to you of kingdoms or parables or the law. It did not come as a touch or a gesture. It spoke in the simple, humble, and deeply disturbing language of the meal itself, a language of bread and wine, of a body that will be broken and blood that will be shed. It was the quietest and most terrifying sermon you have ever heard. The strange, somber meal is over. Jesus stands and leads you and the other disciples out of the upper room and into the cool Jerusalem night. You walk through the quiet, sleeping city and across the Kidron Valley to a place you have been to before, a familiar grove of ancient olive trees on the Mount of Olives. It is called Gethsemane. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and the dusty, silver-green leaves of the olive trees. A full moon hangs in the sky, casting long, strange shadows. He turns to the larger group of disciples and tells them to sit and wait. Then he takes you, along with Peter and James, deeper into the garden. His mood has grown even darker. You have never seen him like this before. The quiet authority, the calm confidence, it is all gone. In its place is a raw human anguish. My soul, he says to you, his voice heavy, is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. He walks a little further on, about a stone's throw away, and he falls to the ground, and he begins to pray. But this is not the quiet, intimate prayer of communion you witnessed that morning on the Galilean hillside. This is a desperate, agonizing plea. This is a negotiation. You can hear his voice, strained and full of pain, carried on the night air. Abba, he cries out, using that same intimate word for Father. Everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. You are supposed to be watching, praying with him, supporting him in his hour of need. But the day has been long and emotionally draining. The meal was heavy. The wine has made you drowsy. Your eyelids feel like they are made of lead. You sit down, leaning against the gnarled trunk of an old olive tree, and though you fight it, your head slumps forward. Sleep, it seems, is more powerful than loyalty. You are awoken by his hand on your shoulder. He looks down at you, his face a mixture of disappointment and profound loneliness. Could you not keep watch for 1 hour? He asks. He goes back to his spot and prays again, his words even more anguished. And again, you and your friends fail him. You fall asleep. In the final, most important moment of his life, his closest friends just want to go to sleep. It is perhaps the most relatable and the most human failure in the entire story. The gospel writer Luke, a physician, would later write that in his agony, Jesus' sweat was like great drops of blood falling to the ground. This is a quirky and fascinating detail. Hematidrosis is a real, though extremely rare medical condition where intense, acute stress and anguish can cause the capillary blood vessels that feed the sweat glands to rupture, causing a person to literally sweat blood. It is a physical manifestation of an almost unbearable psychological torment. You watch him in these brief moments of waking, and you are witnessing the absolute depth of his humanity. This is a moment that theologians and psychologists still debate. What is the nature of this prayer? Is it a moment of genuine human doubt, a man terrified of the pain and death he knows is coming, begging for a different path? Or is it a dramatization of the ultimate spiritual struggle, the perfect submission of the human will to the divine will? Is he showing you what it truly means to say, as you hear him whisper, "Yet not what I will, but what you will"? He comes back a third time and finds you sleeping again. This time he doesn't even seem angry, he just seems resigned. Are you still sleeping and resting? He asks, a gentle irony in his voice. Enough, the hour has come. You struggle to your feet, ashamed and disoriented. The moment of agonizing prayer is over. A new resolve is on his face. He has wrestled with his fear and he has won. He is calm again. And in that moment, you see the flicker of torches through the trees. You hear the sound of soldiers' armor and the angry voices of the temple guard. You have learned the final, most difficult lesson. The divine voice is not always a comfort or a guide. Sometimes it is a call to walk a path of immense suffering, and accepting that call is not a moment of divine, effortless power. It is a moment of human, agonizing struggle. It happens alone, in the dark, in a garden, while your friends are sleeping. The ultimate expression of God walking barefoot through Galilee was not a miracle or a sermon, but this: a moment of profound human fear and the quiet, lonely decision to face it. And so, our journey, a walk alongside this barefoot God, comes to a quiet end in a moonlit garden. We have followed a voice that was not a roar of thunder, but a human voice that told simple stories and shared quiet meals. We have felt a touch that was not a display of power, but a gesture of compassion for the broken and the unclean. We have seen a God who did not demand to be served, but who knelt on the floor to serve. We have heard a love expressed not in a grand theological statement, but in the raw, human tears shed at the tomb of a friend. And we have witnessed a final, divine submission, found not in a triumphant declaration, but in a moment of agonizing prayer, alone in the dark. The story for tonight is over. The walk is done. The dust of the Galilean road has settled. The sounds of the crowds have faded. All that is left is the deep, profound, and peaceful silence of this garden at night. You can let the memory of the journey rest. You can let the questions and the mysteries be still. There is nothing left to do but to feel the coolness of the night air, and to let the stillness of this final, quiet moment carry you gently into your own deep and peaceful sleep.